What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the first preview and prediction, or game preview and prediction, I should say, for week 3. And do we quite possibly have the most interesting game of the week taking place on Friday? It's a top 20 showdown from Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple, and it's home to two Big 12 teams that'll be playing in, yes, a non-conference matchup. This one was scheduled way before Arizona joined the Big 12. It's the Kansas State Wildcats and the Arizona Wildcats. So two Wildcats going head-to-head. We'll tell you who the bigger cat is going to be here in this game in just a little bit. But before I dive on into that, just really quickly, you guys know I have to say thank you for all the love and support, and continue to help support this channel in any way you can. If you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, you got to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know whenever I upload. Do anything else you can help support the channel, and thank you for taking time out of your day to simply watch this video. You can also like, comment, share. Again, anything you do to interact with it helps support it. It does mean a lot. But if you want to follow along with my journey outside of YouTube, kind of some of the other field work I do in my journey to be a sports media professional, go follow me on Twitter at TailgateNate29, capital T, capital N, numbers 29 at the end of it. That's my @. Please go follow me. I'd appreciate all the love and support over there as well. But I'm not going to waste much more time here because I really want to dive on in to talk about this game because, again, as I said at the beginning of this video, this is probably going to be the most interesting game we have here in week 3. Two Wildcats going head-to-head. I believe it's Willie versus Wilbur. I'm actually going to fact check that so I don't have it wrong. And my hunch was correct. It is Willie on the Kansas State side versus Wilbur on the Arizona side. So we'll tell you who's going to win, but I got to tell you first how we break down games here on my channel. We go through some keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So we'll first go through 3 keys to the game when the Arizona offense is on the field against the Kansas State defense, and then we'll flip it. We'll take a look at the Kansas State offense versus the Arizona defense, and of course at the end of the video I'll sort of wrap it up, give you my final predictions, and then we will talk about who I think is going to win this game. Again, top 20 showdown from the Little Apple in Kansas. It should be a fascinating one. Let's first start out when the Arizona Wildcats have the football. Now, overall, when you take a look at Arizona's season, it definitely feels like they could be a lot more impressive. Their defense really struggled against New Mexico in week 1, and then in a gimme game, the games to where top 25 teams go play FCS teams should be like 65-0, and Northern Arizona is not one of the better FCS teams we have. Arizona really struggled. It was only 22-10, and Tailgate McMillan, after coming off a 300-yard, 4-touchdown performance in that first game against New Mexico, only had 2 catches for 11 yards in that previous game, and that's something that has to change here. And there's kind of 2 keys in one that I'm going to touch on right here. But the first thing you need to know about this game is Noah Fifita throwing to Tailgate McMillan. That's one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos we have in the nation this season, and it is going to work beautifully in this game. Why? Well, apart from Sigil back there in that secondary, Kansas State did not fare too well defending the pass in that latest game. They killed University of Tennessee Martin in that first game, but this past week against Tulane, I'll get the official number here up right now, but yeah, they allowed 342 yards of passing. A lot of those were some big plays down the field, and Tulane's passing attack really helped them stay in that game. Now, Kansas State's defense did come up with a huge turnover, a huge scoop and score. They did come up with some great stops, including at the goal line. Penalties aside and controversy aside, the Kansas State defense did step up when it matters, and especially in the second half of that game. Offensively, defensively, the coaching changes and the scheme changes really did help that team succeed. But this secondary has got to play better, because if it doesn't, Noah Fifita is going to be slinging it to Tailgate McMillan and a lot of these other really talented wide receivers that Arizona does possess. Because again, McMillan is the big name here, sure, and you could argue he's the best wide receiver in college football, but Arizona's got a lot of other really good weapons there as well. Jeremiah Patterson, Devin Hyatt, Tyler Powell, Montana Lamonius Craig, and so many other really fascinating weapons, as well as that running back room. Quayle Conley has been running it well for Arizona's offense all season long throughout those first 2 games. He was the leading receiver against Northern Arizona in this previous game. Again, not a game where the passing attack was really working that well for the Arizona Wildcats, but there are a couple things that, again, just have to take that step in the right direction. That connection between Fifita and McMillan has to get better, because if it doesn't, if you're going to try to run the ball on this Kansas State defense, it's not going to work. They've only allowed 92.5 rush yards per game, and I know that's only through 2 games, but this defensive front is absolutely stout. And that's my other key to the game I want to talk about, because if this Arizona offensive line doesn't hold up against this Wildcat front that already has 9 sacks on the season, well, your run game is not going to be able to work. And again, I know the pass game here for Arizona, as I've pointed out, is the key to this game. You still want to get Quaylee Conley and this run game working. You still want to win that battle in the trenches. It's one of the keys to really any football game that you play, but especially in this one, Kansas State likes to line up in that 3-3-5, which can be very, very lethal if they need to. They'll throw in an extra defensive end and go with the 4-2-5, the really popular scheme around college football right now. But for the Arizona Wildcats, that offensive line, look, yes, you've only allowed 2 sacks this season. You haven't really faced the best pass rushing teams yet. Kansas State is by far going to be the best pass rush you face. They're by far going to be the most defensively physical team that you have faced. And that offensive line has got to hold up here, especially if you want to get Quaylee Conley going, because even with how good this Kansas State run defense is, it can be susceptible to some big runs. And we know Quaylee Conley, he can rip off those big runs. But the big key here is watch out for that Fafita and McMillan connection. I know I keep harping on it, and this is the last time I'm going to talk about it, at least for the moment. Oh, excuse me. At least for the moment, it really is just how big of a key it is here to this game. And it mainly is in part to, I think we know that Fafita and McMillan are going to end up refining that connection, and they're going to reestablish that sort of chemistry that they had in that first game. The Kansas State defensive backfield has to take a step in the right direction, because if it doesn't, that spells trouble for this Kansas State defense. But let's now go ahead and look on the other side of the ball on what happens when the Kansas State Wildcat offense is on the field here. Coming into this season, there was a lot of hype surrounding the quarterback in Avery Johnson, and there were some people, not necessarily myself saying this, but there were some people saying, you know, he could have a Johnny Manziel type season where he just absolutely explodes, could be a dark horse Heisman contender. And while this offense hasn't overall fared too bad, that's mainly in part to DJ Giddens. He's had back-to-back 100 rushing yard games. You see the number right there. They're averaging almost 250 rush yards per game. No, I don't have those numbers flipped. They really are averaging just an insane amount of yards on the ground. You need Avery Johnson to be better throwing the football. A lot of people have sort of gotten off of this hype train. I mean, let me just go ahead and read you his stat line from last week. 15 of 23 for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. Solid for sure, but there was a lot bigger expectations for Avery Johnson entering this season, especially when you consider some of the weapons that he does have. Will Swanson, Keegan Johnson, some other really good weapons. DJ Giddens can catch passes out of the backfield, as he did in that last game against Tulane, where he led the team in receiving, 4 catches for 63 yards and 1 touchdown, had 114 rush yards in that game against Tulane. And if we go back to that game against UT Martin, I'll find it 1 second. Kansas State and DJ Giddens, 124 rush yards, and wasn't as big of a receiving piece out of the backfield, but he showed in that Tulane game that he can make it work. For this Kansas State offense to be successful against an Arizona defense that did have their struggles against New Mexico and overall played pretty well against Northern Arizona, Avery Johnson, this is his time to take that next step. This is his time to really explode. At least 250 passing yards and challenge this Arizona secondary. Run those read options really, really well, because that's what Chris Kleiman and Kansas State like to do. And we know that Avery Johnson can get outside of the pocket and run. And when you have a running back as threatening as DJ Giddens in that backfield, it's only going to create more havoc for the opposing defense. But the big first key here, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, Kansas State's quarterback, Avery Johnson, needs to take that next step. If he doesn't, well, again, you know that Noah Fafita and Taylor McMillan are going to be hitting those shots all game long. Avery Johnson's got to find his stride, not only as a runner, but as a passer, find the consistency. And something I haven't really pointed out is the flashes of greatness have been there. We have seen it from Avery Johnson. It needs to be shown on a consistent level here in this game. Tulane was a very, very good test. Arizona is a better team than what the Tulane Green Wave are, and that's not taking anything from what the Green Wave did against this Wildcat team last week. But the zone front has to be able to slow down DJ Giddens. You just heard me rave about him a little bit ago, back-to-back 100-yard games. This is a rushing attack that has worked wonders for Kansas State all season long. It starts with DJ Giddens, but you can also apply it to some of the other running backs they have back there, like Dylan Edwards, the Colorado transfer, Joe Jackson, and even Avery Johnson when he's able to get outside of the pocket and run. So what does Arizona have to do to slow that down? Well, they've already forced 3 turnovers this year. They do have 3 sacks, but this is the Kansas State offensive front that, look, even though they lost BD from last year, even though they lost of other really talented pieces on the offensive line, they still have not allowed a sack this season. And again, you could say, well, it's because they run a lot of RPO. There aren't a lot of opportunities for sacks, whatever. The bottom line is they still haven't allowed a sack this season. You got to be able to create pressure. You got to be able to create havoc in that backfield to slow DJ Giddens down, to get pressure to Avery Johnson, much as Tulane was able to do this past week. When you try to run those read options and you pressure the quarterback, you have no choice at all but to hand it off to the running back. But then that's only one part of the puzzle solved, right? DJ Giddens is a good enough running back to elude a ton of defenders and still get something out of a play where it seems like he's dead in the water. You have to create pressure. You have to create it fast. You have to be flying in that backfield. And that was the big question for Arizona coming into this season. How was the defense going to play? Specifically, how was the defensive front going to play? They lost a lot of pieces in pretty much every level of that defense from last year. And overall, I mean, it's been solid. Yes, you would like that rush yard per game number to be a whole lot lower, and that's the part of the game where they really struggled against New Mexico, who does have some good weapons offensively that they've shown. They haven't really been able to slow down that run game. That's going to be a big key in the game here against Kansas State. But entering my prediction a little bit here, I think Chris Kleiman's experience as a head coach will show through here in this game. And not just as a head coach in general. We know Brent Brennan has been in this business for quite some time as well, has had a lot of good success at San Jose State. This is his first season against power. This is his first season as a Power 4 head coach against consistent Power 4 level teams. And this is his first opportunity for Brent Brennan to go make a statement. I think Chris Kleiman, though, is going to be able to humble him a little bit. Look, this is a good Arizona team. As now we dive on into this prediction, Kansas State, as of recording this video, a 7.5-point favorite. This is an 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That is 8 o'clock p.m., by the way. I'm not going to go change it. I figured you guys know. It's 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday, September 13th. You can watch this game on Fox, and you really should, because this is going to be an absolutely fascinating game. But I think Avery Johnson is going to take that next step. I think DJ Giddens will be too hard to slow down for the Arizona Wildcats. And even though Arizona, that passing attack is going to work and they're going to score some points, I do think that the Kansas State defensive front will be a little bit too much for Arizona State to handle. And especially when you take a look at these head coaches, I think Chris Kleiman's ability to adjust at halftime, much like what happened this past week, is going to come in huge. Because I do see Arizona having the lead in this game at the half, but I think Chris Kleiman and the Kansas State Wildcats are going to be able to adjust. Avery Johnson takes that next step, and the Arizona, I keep switching teams, guys. They're both Wildcats. The Kansas State Wildcats are going to win this game. They are the bigger cat here in Manhattan. They will defend home turf. They're going to get the 4-point victory. I think Arizona's going to make this a very close game, and Arizona absolutely can win this game. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. But Kansas State, with the experience of Chris Kleiman, with everything else they have talent-wise, I think they're going to be able to get this one done. 34-30 is my final score prediction, but I really do want to know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Hey, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. We got more predictions coming out for you, possibly later today, but if not, later on this week as well. Goodbye.